We are back, folks, with another episode of Big Idea 2 Bestseller Podcast. And today we got a special guest for you, all right? We're going to be talking about Amazon ads. We're going to be talking about selling books, marketing books, and making some magic happen. Now, to do this, I've brought in one of the world's best Amazon ads experts. It's my guy, Alex Strathdee. And let me give you a little bit about him. So at 21 years old, Alex convinced 11 colleges to send his book to 40,000 plus students across the United States. Now, he's the founder of the founder of AdvancedAmazonAds.com, where he's worked with 300 plus books and is closing in on $1 million in total ad spend, where he helps authors get their book read. He works from various countries from around the world, and a minimalist at heart. Everything he owns fits into a backpack and duffel bag. When he's not working, you can find him sitting out on a surfboard waiting for the next big wave. Well, let's get that wave rocking and rolling, baby. Alex, welcome to the show.
Jake Kelfer, thanks for having me on, man. I'm excited.
Of course. All right, dude. So I'm going to start here. This wasn't where I planned, but after reading your bio, I need to start here. Everything you own fits in a backpack and a duffel bag. Is that real?
It used to be. I've been out here in San Diego for 2 years now. I have a car, I have a bike, I have a mattress. So no, those don't fit into a bag, but I do still try to keep it pretty minimalistic.
I mean, I love how you answer that, where you're like, I'm going to be honest and say no. But then the things that you mentioned you own are like pretty important necessities when you live in a major city, you know? So I love that. I love that mentality. And I'm interested, how has this minimalist mentality helped your journey in entrepreneurship? And well, let's get into that. Let's just see where that takes us. But has being a minimalist helped you as an entrepreneur? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say cutting out distractions is a big part, but also I think the entrepreneurial journey can be really lonely. And what being a minimalist has allowed me to do is to travel and be able to take my work with me wherever I want. And so the ability to, yes, be on this journey by myself, but be able to have incredible experiences and meet really cool individuals along the way and connect with so many different people, I'd say that's been the biggest benefit to it.
That's so good, man. That's so good. So tell me this. You're all about creating these experiences, right? And this minimalist life gives you a chance to really be more present and experience life as it goes. How have you been able to really maximize that future vision, right, of being an entrepreneur and building an incredible business, but while also still really maintaining that fun and that presence and that minimalist lifestyle as you go day by day?
If you know how, let me know. I have no idea, man. It's been tough. I think it's also just seasons of life. I really started the business. I was down in Ecuador and, I'd work maybe 15, 20 hours a week, but it was more of a side hustle. Wasn't really like serious. And then I moved to San Diego and then I was putting in 70, 80 hours a week for a straight year. Now I've cut back just because that's not sustainable, but man, balance is tough. Now, I think when you're getting something off the ground, you just have to give it your all. And then as soon as you start to get some traction, you can take your foot off the gas pedal, which is what I'm trying to do now. So,
yeah, it's interesting that you say that. My mom, when I was growing up, I'm very ambitious driven. And my mom, she used to send me a text, all the time that said, live in the moment and enjoy the journey. And what's crazy is sometimes in our life, all it takes is just a little bit of a reminder or a little bit of something that kind of switches gears. And you're like, oh, I'm here. I'm present. I get it. And the longest time I didn't understand that concept at all. I was just like, no, mom, stop it. Like, you don't know what I'm trying to do. But what I've realized is that the more I live through that philosophy, the more I'm able to execute in the now to build for the future. And so this is one of those things that no one, I think, has ever really figured out the answer, because we're humans and we're constantly evolving. And with evolution comes the requirement to make adjustments and changes. And depending on the season that you're in, depending on the season of life you're in, the season of entrepreneurship you're in, the season of literal weather, like that could play a big role into it. So it is always fascinating to me when we talk about this pursuit of greatness. Now, you have an incredible pursuit for greatness. I mean, you got 11 colleges to send your book to 40,000 students. Now, talk to us about this story here, because this is going to lead us into the whole journey of how you got to where you're at today. So tell us the story of how you got colleges to send a book to 40,000 plus students around the world or around the country.
Well, first of all, Jake, I think we have the same mom, quite possibly, because I get those same messages all the time, and they're definitely useful. But you're like, stop it, mom, come on. But yeah, so when I was a college student, a good friend of mine and I, Rashad Kanal, we were so focused on entrepreneurship, and we're like, how can we help people? And one thing we did really well was getting big companies to take notice of our resumes and give us job interviews. And so like we were interviewing with the likes of Google, and he ended up working for LinkedIn, and I ended up working for Appian, and I was flown to Texas by Microsoft for an interview. I mean, we were just really good at interviewing and professionalism. And so we're like, what do we know about professionalism? So we started a podcast about how college kids can be more professional. Super exciting topic, right? And then we gained some traction with the podcast. We were starting to bring on some bigger and bigger guests. And then we were able to then leverage that into a book. And little did we know, no college kid has an extra $10 to buy a career guide when their college gives it to them for free, right? And so we had to get creative with our marketing. And I think for any author out there who's listening who really wants their books to sell, you have to either be willing to spend a fortune or get really creative with your marketing. And so we didn't have any money at the time. And so what we need to do is get creative. And so I sat in coffee shops every weekend, and I would just web scrape college website after college website, getting the email addresses of people we need to reach out to. And then I'm sure there's probably some more technically savvy way to do it, now. But yes, we just did that and then sent out those emails, and we had 11 colleges get back to us saying, yeah, we'd love to distribute our book to our students, but they wouldn't pay for it. The only person who was willing to pay for it was Kansas State. They purchased 300 copies at cost. There's no margin of profit, but we were just excited because it was someone paying for 300 copies, right? And so what we did is we now had a distribution of around 40,000 students. And so what we saw was an opportunity, well, we have a distribution of 40,000 students, who wants to get in front of those students? And we looked to the people who did have money, which was, companies like Kohl's and Elephant Insurance and, Apex, the couple, they're staffing and HR recruiting, whatever. But essentially they're the ones with the money, and they wanted to hire those students. And so we thought, well, why not sell full page ads in our book now that we have the distribution, and sell them to these companies for $1,000 a page? And that was kind of our first induction into entrepreneurship post-college. And that was how the book got sent out and how we ended up making money. So,
dude, this is incredible. And this podcast is for people who are getting ready to write their book, or who have a book and need to figure out ways to be creative, to market it. And so I'm interested here. You sell $1,000 ads in your book. All right. What is your pitch to these companies? And are you going to the national company, like the main headquarters, or are you going cold calling at the local regional store and being like, hey, I got this book, it's getting out to this many people, this is my pitch? Like, what was the offer there in the pitch?
Yeah, the pitches started out awful, but it just comes down to what the value is. I mean, luckily, I've learned so much in business. It's just figuring out who actually has money to spend. And these companies who wanted to hire these students had a lot of money. And so the pitch is just essentially, first of all, there's the goodwill portion of it, where you're supporting a project that's going to help students, get better jobs, become better versions. So you might get better employees. And the second half was direct leads. And so we had links to job applications on the ads. Now, hindsight's 2020, not many students actually ended up clicking on those, but we did have a few for each. I mean, even one good hire is well worth the investment, just because staffing firms will charge 20-30% of a salary just to bring someone on. So, was the ROI there? Maybe. It was our first induction into figuring everything out. But the pitch was essentially, one, the goodwill, and then two, a direct way to get leads for their company.
This is great, because my first book was a career development book, and I remember when I first started selling, I was like, who's buying this? And so what I did, one of my creative ways was I started building relationships with the right departments in colleges.
Awesome.
And for example, it would be a teacher that I had a connection with who was an alumni of USC, where I went to school, or I had a friend who was in the sports management program at Syracuse who introduced me to their career development internship coordinator. And what happened is those people, my way of being able to do it was those people put my book as required reading. And so now it's fantastic. Not, I want to get this as an ancillary resource. It's, I have to get it. And then we'll bring the author in to speak. So now, because I'm willing to do whatever. I was 23 at the time. So I was like, I'll go anywhere, do anything. Like, I'm trying to build something. So that was like my pitch is like, look, hey, you do it. I'll come out to speak to everybody and they can meet the author. And for me, like that was awesome to be invited. For them, it was like, we're meeting the author, right? And the funniest thing is when I was in Syracuse, I ended up going out to party. It was Halloween weekend. I was like, this is crazy. I just wrote the book that they're reading in class, yet I'm also partying with them because they're, 2 years younger than me. So it was funny. But what I love about your story up to so far, and it just keeps getting better, is there's always a way to be creative. There's always a way to make something happen. And after you did this, that was your first thing into entrepreneurship. You got your feet wet. Where did it take you from there to then figuring out, okay, I need to get involved with ads and specifically Amazon ads? Like, where did that come into play after?
Yeah, well, first of all, I like your approach better, Jake. I like how you actually got to like interact with the students, because I think when you put something out into the world, yeah, obviously making money is a good part of it, but getting to really see the impact it's making and the people who are actually, their lives are being changed, that's super cool. So that's really cool that you got to speak on campuses. I wish you'd go back and tell us to have gone that approach, because I think that's awesome. So what we did from there is we really had two companies that we could spin off. So we could keep pushing the professionalism consulting type stuff for students, for companies. And that's actually the way that we went first before going into book marketing. And so my colleague really loved that stuff. I didn't love the professional development as much as he did, but we ended up starting a software company, and we actually sold 2 deals to like Red Ventures down in North Carolina, and then some other company as well. And it was basically consulting with their recruiting team to go back to college campuses. And then part of it was we threw in the software that no one's going to buy software from 2 dudes who coded it, in their parents' garage or whatever. But we did sell. I am proud of us that we sold 2 things, but over time we just learned like you need capital to start a software company. We just couldn't do it. So we ended up splitting ways, parting ways on that one. And then we had learned about book marketing. And so I thought, well, it'd be kind of cool to kind of dabble with some Amazon ads here, see what we can do. And I just had a lot of authors take note. I ended up working with someone who kind of did publishing for authors. And she was like, oh, well, I'll just send you some clients afterwards. And started off really small, working with some really small time books. And so we started with really cheap clicks. And this was also 3 years ago when you could get really cheap clicks. And now we're working with the likes of, Oren Klaff, Tony Fadell, Brendan Kane, Mike Michalowicz, some really big time authors. And it's just been a whole huge learning curve going from working with, mom and dads and figuring out what they wanted with the book to now working with, some more high-end million copies sold type books. So,
So who should be using Amazon ads, right? You mentioned that you've had this evolution of people that you're just getting started working with, people that are trying to figure out what they want to use their book for, all the way up to people that have sold thousands, hundreds of thousands of books. Who is the person that should be using Amazon ads, and when in your journey do you think it's most effective?
Yeah, so first of all, Amazon ads should be viewed as gasoline that you throw on a fire. And if you are launching a book and you expect Amazon to sell it for you, that's not going to happen. You need to get a fire started your own way. And authors do this in a multitude of ways. One of my favorite stories is Mike Michalowicz when he was first writing, Profit. I think it was Profit First. What he did was he reached out, similarly to how we did it, Jake. He reached out to universities or he reached out to organizations on campus actually and said, hey, your university, you don't know this, but your university actually sets aside a budget to have speakers come in and speak on campus. Here's the message. And he wrote up a template. Can you request your administration that they bring me in to speak to you? And so he was essentially putting his words in the voices of college kids that they would ask these colleges to bring him in to speak. And he'd get paid for it and they'd buy X amount of copies. Well, those students would take their books home on their breaks, on their Christmas breaks, on their Thanksgiving breaks, and they would just leave it on their desk at home or whatever when they went back to school. Well, moms, stay-at-home entrepreneurial moms were picking up his book, Profit First, and also a lot of them, would run the finances for their husbands' companies. And so they would pick up these books, and all of a sudden, over the course of like 6 months to a year, after these kids were taking them home, a huge following of mompreneurs and moms who are helping with the family business were just going crazy about this book, and it was blowing up like crazy. It was never the audience that Mike intended, right? It's an audience of moms. It was never his target audience, but it's the audience that then carried him to the masses. And so I think that's an example. Now his books sell incredibly well, and we throw Amazon ads on it. And because Amazon already gives him so much love because they know his books are going to sell, they're much more willing to show his ads. But if you're an author who's just starting out and you're competing with the likes of Mike Michalowicz or a lot of these other big name authors, your ad's going to be really expensive. And you're also, when someone looks at your book about systematizing business, and then they look at Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz, that book has over 700 reviews. If you're starting out with 5 to 10 reviews, you're just not going to sell that many copies and you will lose money. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't run Amazon ads. I'll get to that in a second of how it can still be lucrative. But the first thing is you just need to be, one of my favorite, mentors in book marketing or just the literary world is Bill Gladstone. He's the literary agent to people like Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Marie Kondo, people who have sold millions and millions of copies of their books. And he says, if you're going to spend 1,000 hours writing your book, you better damn well be willing to spend 1,000 hours marketing your book. And a lot of authors don't go into it with that mindset. And there's many different books out there on marketing, and happy to dive into that deeper. But essentially, you just need to get a fire started in order to get your book selling over time.
So let me ask you this, though, because, there's a lot of new authors on our show or that listen to this show. What can they do? Let me rephrase that. Is reviews the metric that you as an ads expert would say, okay, there's a threshold here because this is what really is going to set you apart? Is reviews the metric that you kind of use as leverage?
Yes and no. So it is, someone can get, use Puppy or something to get 100 reviews. And if their book still doesn't have any organic sales, it's not going to do anything for them. So reviews by themselves don't sell books. But if you are driving traffic, the way you can think of it is everyone who goes to your book page is going to be, for every review you have is going to be 0.00, and I'm totally making up this number, 0.002% higher likelihood of them converting into a reader. And so, and then within that, there's different thresholds. So right now, I recommend all of our authors get to at least 100 reviews. We oftentimes don't even take books unless they're around 100 or have a plan to get to 100. And when you hit that 100 bump, you can think of it, okay, now there's a 5% increase in conversions just because people see the triple digits. And then the next level is usually around 500. When people see 500 views, it's another, additional 5-10%. And then the next threshold is 1,000. So each review, every single review matters. And I've seen this, in an author going from 60 reviews to 70 reviews does increase conversions. But also when you hit those big numbers of like 100, 500, 1,000, those are also really important. But at the end of the day, if you're just getting reviews from people who aren't actually reading your book, all you're going to do is confuse the Amazon algorithms, and they're not going to give you the love that you need. So reviews do help, but they're not everything.
So answer this for me, because I do think reviews are really important. And before we move on, are there any tips that you have for authors who want to get to that 100 review threshold? And what could they do? What are some creative ways to get more reviews and do it in a way where you're not breaking any of the Amazon rules or doing anything that is cheating, right? Like play the game, but don't cheat the game. So what can you do to get more reviews in creative ways?
Yeah, so there's 3 ways immediately I can think of. And Puppy is not a bad way to start as long as you have other sales. The problem with Puppy...
What is that? Explain that for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, so pubby.co, essentially it's a platform where you go and you review other people's books and you get something called snaps, and then you're able to turn those snaps in for reviews. Now, that is good if you have no other way to get reviews, and that is your only way. You got to start with what you can do, right? It's control what you can. And that is a platform where you can get going with that. It'll work best if you have your book at like 99 cents, and there's videos out there you can go watch. It's not too expensive too. They'll try to upsell you, but you can get it down to I think it's like $11 a month or something. And so the only problem with that is it does take a lot of time. You got to review other people's books. I have done it before, and I've had an admin in the Philippines do it for me because I don't have time to, I like to think my time is worth more than, sitting down reading someone else's book for 5 or 6 hours. As entrepreneurs, most people listening to this probably don't have the time to do that. So I would look into outsourcing that to maybe a virtual assistant or something. But essentially, it's a review swapping site. Now, the issue with that is you are really going to confuse the algorithms because the people purchasing your book from using Puppy are also probably purchasing books that have nothing else to do with your book. They have nothing to do with your book, right? They're reading romance because it has the highest word count. They get the most credit for, basically the longer the book is, the more snaps you get. And so people aren't going to read necessarily in genre. And it also doesn't give Amazon a true sneak peek into, okay, here's what my book is actually about based on the reading habits of the readers. Because Amazon has all that data. They know that if someone's reading Mike Michalowicz's books, they're also reading Alan Dibb's books, right? They see on the back end and their ability to recommend things. So if you are only getting sales because of the reviews that you're doing on Puppy, then you are going to confuse Amazon a lot. But if you do have sales elsewhere, then Puppy is not a bad way to go. So that's the first thing, is using a review swapping site like Puppy, but just understand the pros and cons of it. Second, and this is something I'd never seen done before, and I'm actually now implementing it within a lot of our business authors books, and even outside of business authors, is essentially Alex Hormozi. He wrote a book called $100 Million Offers. Phenomenal book. Highly recommend it for anyone who's listening to this. It's like done wonders for my business. But essentially, and you can even hear by my pitch, it's a good book, right? Like, it's not a crappy book. And so that's obviously the most important thing, and is to write a good book. And I wasn't even going to go there with this, but I'd recommend like Write Useful Books by Rob Fitzpatrick. Is an awesome book on how to actually write a book that's like really going to help people. But besides the point, going back to Alex Hormozi, he wrote at the after the first third of his book, right after a big wow, you just had this awakening of, oh my goodness, I just learned so much. He says he connects goodwill with leaving a review. Most authors write one sentence at the end of their book saying, hey, if this helped you, can you leave a review? It'll help me sell more books, right? There's a couple issues. One, it's at the end of the book. Most people aren't going to make it to the end of your book. The second issue is you're making it about the author. You're not making it about the reader. And so what Alex Hormozi did differently was he wrote his review ask a third of the way through the book, because most people will actually get to that point if they're picking up the book. And then the second thing is he made it not about him. He essentially said, hey, what has this book done for you so far? Like, is there any big takeaways that you've had? Well, think about what those takeaways could do for a struggling entrepreneur with 2 kids who wants to put their kids through college with their business, right? What could this book do for them? This could be the difference between their kids going to college and not going to college. And this is not exact word for word, but will you be the person who makes sure that this author or this entrepreneur finds this book? Because the only way they're going to find that book is if you leave a review on this book. So please be the person, I know you are, help other people who are struggling just like you and leave a review. It's like just such a bigger ask than like, hey, if you like this book, leave me a review, right? It's like connecting it to, you are making a difference in the world just by leaving a review. And the chapter, it's a 3-page chapter, and it's literally titled Free Goodwill. So I'd highly recommend that. That's the second thing. So first thing's Puppy. Second thing is putting your review ask in the first third of the book. Now, obviously, that's only going to work if you are selling books, right? If you're not selling books, that doesn't do anything for you, right? Third thing is whenever someone, again, this is if people are, you do have a few people reading your book, people are reaching out saying, hey, love the book. Reply to them. Don't immediately say, oh, that's great. Can you leave a review? Reply to them and say, hey, what did you like about it? Like, quick answer to like, what did you actually enjoy about the book? How did it help you? I'd love to hear. And then once they email you back saying, here's what I enjoyed about your book, then you can just say, hey, here's my link for leaving a review. Can you just copy and paste that into an Amazon review for me? And if you get someone to do the work before you ask like why they're actually doing the work, they're much more willing to do it because they feel like you're actually just talking with you. It's not just like, oh, go leave a review and then no one knows what to say. It's like, can you just tell me like in your own words, like, what do you enjoy about the book? And then it's so easy for them just to copy and paste that. So it's lowering the barrier for people to convert into reviews. So those are 3 easy ways that you can Puppy, putting your review ask in the first third of the book, and then actually asking people what did they like about the book and then copying and pasting that into a review.
I'm just thinking as you're talking about this, like what I'm doing in my book that I'm writing and how I'm thinking about it and things that I've done in the past, opportunities I missed out on. And we talk about Hormozi's book, $100 Million Offers, great book. I was reading it literally 3 hours ago to find how he structured the chapter, and it's called Free Goodwill. It's right after, like you said, a wow moment, and it takes the ask, and it really is just like, don't you want to help somebody? Like it's not a review for me, it's a review for them. And that's amazing. Community, right? Like that's community. It shifts the perspective. And so I love that. I've never implemented it there. I've implemented it in the back, right? On my first book, I don't even think I said anything because I was nervous about asking people for stuff, right? So there is an evolution, but what we're saying is, look, we both have sold books. We both marketed books. This is a great strategy to implement. And so I'm doing it in my next book, and I'm encouraging, some of our clients to do it as well. And then the third way that you mentioned, like, so good. I've made the mistake of someone says, oh, I loved your book. I say, great, leave a review. Never hear from them again. And it's like, you got to think about like, how do you make it easier for them, right? And when you say, oh, what did you enjoy? What you're doing is you're building the rapport, but you're also getting them to tell you what you need for the review. And then the copy and paste ask is so much easier than can you write a review, because people panic about what do I write on the review? You've given them the prompt. Now you've had the rapport, and now you're asking for the favor. Hey, could you do this? Because then it will help somebody else find this book, right? So I love this, man. I love this. Now, about 5 minutes ago, maybe 10 minutes ago, maybe 7 minutes ago, I don't know, you had mentioned talking about Amazon ads and why there still might be a positive ROI, or why you might want to run Amazon ads, even if you're not making your money on just the Amazon ads. So let's talk about why it can be valuable for somebody to use Amazon ads, but not necessarily get the same amount of return on their ad spend, which would be a negative ROI for people who are new to the ad world. You're spending money, you're making less, but in the long run, it actually is going to make you more money. How do you explain that, and how do we talk about that?
Yeah. So, for example, one of our authors, Oren Klaff, now the book, he wrote a book called Pitch Anything. That book has sold millions and millions of copies in the past. But now, I mean, it was 2010, I believe, so over 10 years ago, right? Recently, we started marketing that book again just because of the fact that it brings him deals. He closes, $1 million deals because of people, people who are running startups read his book. And so for him, there's just a lot more to gain. And so that's the type of author, if you have more to gain from the book than book royalties themselves. And he's also a traditionally published author, which means he's only making 10% of royalties versus a traditionally published author who's making 60 to 70%, depending on the Kindle or paperback, right? And so we have other authors too, who are, they have a direct lead generation to, like Ed Rush is another one of our clients. He wrote a book called 21 Day Miracle. Awesome book about just being able to change things really quickly. In the first page of that book, and I would recommend anyone, you can go look at his book on Amazon and even just use the look inside feature. You'll see that the first page is actually a link to a complimentary video course that essentially, and resources that is essentially the book on steroids. And another person who did this really well is Pat Flynn, actually. And I'll use this example. And going back to Ed Rush real quick, he sells events, he sells course stuff in it. So the ROI is just so much greater on the back end of the book. And he sells his book for 99 cents, his Kindle for 99 cents. And it's priced with the strategy of the back end that he's going to do for it. The other client, no, he's not a client of ours. I'd love for him to be a client. I just happen to know his story. Pat Flynn, he wrote In Will It Fly? When he launched that book, he had a companion course that he launched alongside the book for free, basically saying, hey, if you want more content, where I dive into what I was thinking about when I was writing each chapter, sign up. So that's why it's lead generation, right? He's getting their emails. Pat Flynn, then a few months later, that book was very successful. He sold, I think over 100,000 copies. A few months later, he launched a paid version of that course. Now, he had been warming up that traffic for a few months, giving them value, teaching them about who he is, how he can help them, actually helping them. And then a few months after the book launch, he launched a paid course to that same list and made 6 figures that day. Now that completely makes up for, any ad spend or any marketing costs that went along with the book. And so it just comes down to, if you have something more to get from the book, but word to the wise here, no one wants to buy your damn course after reading your book. If you say, buy my $300, I don't know if I'm not curse on this one, but 300, if you have a $300 course because after, someone reads your book, no one's going to be ready yet to buy that course. It's okay to sell them at some point, but I wouldn't say access my $50 course, in the front of the book, because no one's ready to buy your course yet. So build that relationship, provide as much value as possible over a few months, get people to know you. So just understand how the process works. Don't think that just because you put a course in your book and sell it, it's going to sell, because it probably won't.
Yeah, this is great. And the examples you gave are really great. And I want to elaborate on this customer journey standpoint from a book perspective. When somebody is reading your book, this may be the first time they've ever introduced to you, or they may have heard about you and this is their way of learning more about you, or maybe they're a super fan and they just want to get all the good stories that maybe they've heard on 6 podcasts, but now they really want to hear it in your own words, written on paper, so they could be inspired over and over again. Whatever way it is, once they read your book, the coolest thing that you can do is to get that person's information, right? And so as an author who's growing a business with an offer on the back end, what you really want to think about is, how can I get this person from a reader where I don't have any of their data into how can I get them to be a subscriber where now I can email them or text them with permission to now start providing more and more value and more intimate touch points. Now, all of a sudden, you've gone from someone who buys your book on Amazon to now someone who's on your email list. Then you build that rapport, and over the next month, 6 months, 2 years, they can become a customer. which as you get deeper into business, this can become something where you track, which is your average order, and then it could be your lifetime value. And what you could find is that by giving somebody something for free in your book, you get them to your email list. And from your email list, you know that person's worth $100 over the next 5 years. Great. I can spend $100 to bring somebody in to break even, right? And so this stuff is so important because it's bigger than the 37 cents of royalties you're going to get or the 526 that you're going to get on royalties. And that's what I really want you guys to understand here. And this is why Alex is so good at what he does. He's thinking about how do you get the long-term vision through leveraging the ads platform. It's not just, oh, I spend 5, I need 10, otherwise it's a failure. Now, if that's all you're doing, then yeah, you might not want to use ads. And that's why you got to remember, get these reviews first, show proof of concept, and then you can really blow this thing up. So I love the way you break that down for everybody, Alex. When it comes to, budgets and people are thinking, oh, I kind of want to try Amazon ads. Is there a monthly budget that you'd recommend? Facebook, Instagram ads, it's like the person that could spend the most will spend it and you'll get those eyeballs. But other ad platforms, that's not really how it works. So talk to me about, is there a monthly budget you recommend, a minimum just like ad spend, or how does that work for people who are interested in Amazon ads and potentially even working with you?
Yeah, and you added some really important details in that last bit too about the whole built out book funnel and how it looks is giving away something free in your book, whether it's like a free course or like that is such a huge part, is like you need to be giving away something free. People will then come over and you might be able to convert. Best conversion rates I've heard of like 30%, and on the low end you might convert maybe 5%. So that's really important detail that you added there. So thank you for adding that in there, Jake. Going into Amazon ad budgets, every author is going to be different. If you are doing a lot of organic, if you're that author who's on the ground, hustling, doing everything they can, you've got you're doing like what Chris Voss did with, Never Split the Difference. He literally did a virtual podcast tour where he was hitting like 10 podcasts a day for like 6 months, right? Like if you're doing that level of hustle, you're going to be able to, like, you can test Amazon ads. Like I would recommend testing Amazon ads, and you can maybe throw a couple $100 at it, right? And just get started when it's easy. Most authors long-term will actually have most success with their auto campaigns. I'm going to give away a freebie here. I have a free course. I don't have a paid course. I never try to upsell you to anything. I have a free course. Hopefully it works so well for you that you do end up hiring us full-time, but I don't have a paid course or anything else I'm trying to upsell you to. I have a free course which will show you exactly how to do any of this. You can just go to our website, www.advancedamazonads.com, and that's where you can get onto our subscriber list. And that's where you'll get our free course. It's like a really well built out course. I think it's better than any of the paid courses about Amazon ads. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because everything I'm about to say to you is going to sound like, I don't know, like German. And if you don't speak German, it's going to be very difficult. And so like, if this is overwhelming, step-by-step guide, go to our website. So essentially you want to get some auto campaigns started out initially. That's like where most authors are going to actually see their biggest return over time. And for the novice author who just wants to kind of test the waters, that's what I would recommend. You could probably get away with like a $200-300 a month budget. If you are an author who's just done minimal marketing. Now, if you've done a lot of marketing, Amazon's going to have a lot more data about your book. And so your auto ads are going to work a whole lot better because Amazon knows the 10 closest books to your book. And so you'll look to probably spend a little bit more on your ads. But the good thing is you don't pay per impression, you pay per click. So Amazon will only charge you when someone's actually clicking on your ad, if there is interest. And, there's different metrics, different people will say different metrics, but a good ad might convert at anywhere from, one in or a CT or click-through rate, which is the amount of people who are clicking on your ad versus the amount of people who are actually viewing your ad, of around anything 0.2 is tolerable. If you're getting up to like 0.6, 0.7, that's amazing. So there's kind of some numbers to keep an eye out for. And then when it comes to your conversion rates, a good product page will convert at anywhere from 1 in 20. 1 in 20 is like a, kind of okay book page. And then if you're converting at like 1 in 5, clearly Amazon loves you, and you've got some other things going for you. You're probably doing some other branding as well. So there's just kind of some numbers to keep in mind when you're running your ads initially, but the initial author, maybe $200-300 getting started. If you are doing more marketing, then you're probably gonna end up spending more on Amazon ads. And then on the high end, we personally don't bring authors on unless they're willing to spend $1,500 a month. So we are obviously at the high end. We only work with authors who do have a lot of brand, and so we know they're going to use that budget. So those are kind of the different levels that you can expect.
You mentioned something really interesting that kind of made me, think about how you can use Amazon ads to get better data, right? There are so many ways to get creative about understanding how to sell your book. One of the best ways to sell anything is to increase your conversion rate. Well, you as a general author and me as a general author, like when I go to my Amazon page, I can't see general conversion rates. You can't get that data. But if you're using the platform and paying the platform to run ads, AKA you're paying $100 and you're getting marketing for you for that $100, you now will have data of how many people are interested in this book. What is the conversion rate of cold traffic? If it's 1 in 100 or if it's 1 in 20, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can improve on that page. And most authors never visit their product description, never visit their sales page, never optimize that. And I'm guilty of this too. Like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so much I can do, but now there's a way to get the data. So look, you can use Amazon ads to test. You can use Amazon ads for data. You can use Amazon ads to sell on the back end. There's so many different ways to do it, but unless you try it, you'll never know. So that's why you got to get Alex's course on it, because he'll tell you how to set it up completely free. Then you're going to start crushing it. You're going to start seeing what works, what doesn't. You're going to make the adjustments. You're going to go get the 100 reviews using what Alex said today. And then you're going to be at a point where you're like, dude, I can't believe I'm here. Like, I need you now. Let's put gasoline on the fire and let's take it to a whole new level. So this has been unbelievable, man. Is there any last ads or book marketing commentary that you want to add for our authors who are ready to get their book to that next level and sell some copies?
I would say, think about, a lot of authors have an issue with the marketing portion of it because there's no metric that says I was successful in my marketing versus I'm not successful. It's kind of like you sell a crap ton of books or you don't sell a crap ton of books, right? And so as an author, going in and how you should think about your marketing, obviously for those of you that are after your marketing or after your book launch, you can still kind of use this in your mind. Of a lot of authors will never know, like, and will be left feeling, and I know because I'm I understand the author journey, is, like, could my book have done better? And it's a matter of understanding that when you're launching your book, you should have an idea in mind of, I'm going to get 1,000 copies into the wild. I'm going to get 10,000 copies into the wild, or maybe you're just going to get 50 copies into the wild, right? But you need to have a number that you are going to be committed to getting your book out there. Now, different people, like Rob Fitzpatrick says you need 1,000 copies. Bill Gladstone says you need 20,000 copies, right? So people have different levels, but just have an idea of what is your goal and how many copies you're going to get out there. And then once you have that, then you can reverse engineer and figure out, okay, how am I going to move these copies? And then over time, the goal is, if it's a good enough book, like for example, Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, sells more and more copies every year. And that book's been out for, I think, since like 2006, right? I think I have that number off a little bit, but he gets bigger and bigger royalty checks every single month simply because word of mouth. Right? So if you have written a good book, and that's how you can know, is by committing to getting a certain amount of copies into the wild, and then you can sit back and know that you've done your marketing, you've done the best you can, see if it continues to sell copies. And if you know that, if you can see that there's no organic traffic that happens after you get those copies into the wild, that means you need to do something about your book. You need to change it, maybe write a new book, retitle it, something needs to change there. And so really it's just having an idea of, how many copies am I going to commit to getting into the wild? And then that's how you can know, okay, is my book a successful book or is it not a successful book, based on the reaction the market has to it.
Amazing. Amazing. And I'll put it into your terms here. 20,000 books. You're not going to get there by just going to 20,000. You're going to get there by 10,000. But to get to 10,000, you need to get to 5,000. From 5,000, you need to start at 1,000. Now we're getting into all these good numbers. From 1,000, you need to get to 500. From 500, you need to get to 100. From 100, you need to get one book out into the wild. You know how you get one book out into the wild? You write a damn good book. And if you need help doing that, that's what we help you do with, right? So if you want to get this book so that then you can have these numbers and get to this point, I'd love to help you get there. And you can use everything that we talked about to go from one idea to a book that continues to sell and sell and sell. So Alex, how do we connect with you? How do we follow along? And remind us, how do we get the free course that you've generously offered?
Yeah, and first of all, the reason why people like you, like Jake here, are so important is because, like, he's just seen this over and over again. Like, if you've learned anything throughout this episode, it's because like Jake and I used to know as much as you did. Maybe you know more than us. Maybe you're listening to this and you do know more than us, and that's great. Then you should get in contact with us, and maybe Jake will have you on the show. But like just talk to people who have gone down this route before, because just pointing you, in off of going off the wrong like cliff ledge like a few times here and there is going to make all the difference in your book being successful or not. For those of you that are at that point, you're like, I'm serious about my marketing, I have the budget to get serious about my Amazon ads, feel free to reach us at www.advancedamazonads.com. And like I said, you can also get on our email list there as well.
Boom. Amazing, dude. What an absolutely incredible episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, go get Alex's course. Like, it's awesome and it'll give you what you need. And if you are like, oh gosh, I need my book now more than ever before, I'm writing my book in 90 days or less and launching it to bestseller status in 90 days or less. And I'm doing this and I'm showing you exactly what I'm doing. I'm currently in this process. And so if you want to follow along or jump in and see exactly what I do to get a book done so quickly, then text the word bestseller to 661-669-7363. Again, text bestseller to 661-669-7363. And you can see exactly what I do to get a book done really quickly. That will help a lot of people. So thanks so much for coming on, Alex. I appreciate you. And for everyone that's listening, I appreciate you for giving us your time, your attention, and your energy. And I hope that you found something absolutely game-changing for you that you can incorporate into your life. All right, everybody. I'll talk to you next time.